What happens when one vegan gets a bee in her bonnet and the other gets her feathers ruffled? We're about to find out. Welcome back to Totally Forkable. We're doing something a little different and completely new today, which is that I am doing a collaboration with my coworker and friend, Jasmin Singer from the Hen House podcast. Basically, what happened is that Jasmin was upset by a recent YouTube video posted by Chelsea Fagan of The Financial Diet. And she texted me about it, and then she voice noted me about it. I watched it. We were voice noting back and forth. Feathers were ruffled, bees were in bonnets, and I was like, you should really do a video on this for our Hen House. And she was like, well, I was thinking you should do a video on it for Totally Forkable. And from there, forces were combined, and what happened is what you're about to see. I have never turned something around from idea to filming so quickly. We were texting about it yesterday morning. She was like, can we film this today? I was like, we have back-to-back meetings all day today. So I put together a super quick outline. We recorded it after work, and here we are today. So it's a totally different style that I'm used to, but I'm very grateful to Jasmin for pushing us to do this. We ended up having such an amazing, interesting conversation that I think you're really going to enjoy. And all the context that you'll need, we get into when we start the conversation. So don't you worry about that. Before we get into it, though, I want to introduce Jasmin and our Hen House, because like I said, this is a collaboration between Totally Forkable and our Hen House. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Jasmin Singer because she has been a fixture in the vegan landscape for, honestly, the last 2 decades. She is a vegan activist, author, writer, media personality, and so many things. I always say she wears so many hats. Notably, she was the former senior editor and now editor at large for Veg News, which is, I think, how I had really been familiar with her and first heard her name. She's written 2 books, Always Too Much and Never Enough, and The Veg News Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. And she's the co-founder of Our Hen House, which she started in 2010 with Marianne Sullivan. Our Hen House is a nonprofit media organization. Their flagship podcast of the same name has been running weekly since 2010, which I think makes it the longest running vegan podcast, but maybe I'm wrong. They have so many interesting guests on the show. Like, if you can think of an interesting or noteworthy person in the vegan movement, the animal protection movement, chances are they've had that person on their podcast. The podcast has received multiple Webby Award honors, and I just think if you like Totally Forkable, you will really like our Hen House if you don't already listen to it. Their discussions are always so fascinating. They approach things in a very intellectual but approachable way. They're very non-judgmental. They dive deep, but they also keep it light. They're both hilarious, and they just have such a great dynamic between the two of them. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. So I also want to give a shout out to Marianne Sullivan, the other half of our Hen House, the co-founder and co-host of the podcast. Marianne is an animal rights lawyer, professor activist with a particular expertise in animal law. She teaches at Cornell Law School. She's also taught at NYU and Columbia. She's held leadership roles on animal law committees, both of the American Bar Association and the New York City Bar Association. And she also hosts the Animal Law Podcast, which is one of the podcasts under the Our Hen House umbrella. So go check out Our Hen House on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, subscribe to them, rate them 5 stars, give them thumbs up, all the supportive things. This conversation that Jasmin and I had is also being posted over there. It's mostly the same conversation, but it's a little bit of an extended version over there. So let's get into the conversation. It's about 40 minutes, so you can listen, you can watch, whatever floats your boat, whatever forks your food. Make sure to give both videos a thumbs up, give a hype if you have any hypes left to give. Subscribe for more Forkable content and for more feathery content over there. And let's get into our conversation.
Welcome to the Hen Report, Marielle.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. We've been planning this for like 15 minutes. So I'm really excited about it. All right, we have some things to get off our chest, and the Hen Report feels like a better place to do it than just in our text messages, because why just keep it to us when we could complain to the millions and millions of listeners worldwide that we have?
The group chat was going wild, and by group chat, just the two of us.
Just the two of us. I just want to say I'm very sad and heartbroken about what we're going to be talking about. So should I kind of lay it all out there for our listeners so that they could join in on the chat with us?
Yes, let's get into it.
Okay, so there is a YouTube channel, and please jump in if I'm saying anything incorrectly or whatever. It's called The Financial Diet, and it's run by this woman, Chelsea, who is like half-time in France, and half-time in New York City. She has dual citizenship, I believe, but it is American by birth. And the Financial Diet talks about, she's a millennial. She talks a lot about millennial financial issues, but it goes so far beyond that. It's like a cultural analysis of like so many issues, some of which center around consumerism and just kind of having like this weird throwaway society. But it also gets into other issues that are in the zeitgeist, like body image issues. I don't always agree with her, but I have always found her pretty insightful. And I guess I want to say up front that when I first started watching/listening to her, I heard her make this offhanded reference about veganism that I was like, okay, ew. But then I decided that a lot of my, a lot of the YouTubers I follow are not vegan, so why am I ewing that, and why can't I just compartmentalize and listen to her for the sake of the things she talks about? So I put it away begrudgingly. Flash forward to a few days ago, she has this video, and we will link to it in the show notes, and it's about like comparing the consumerism in France with the consumerism in the US. And in the middle of this discussion, she starts, talking about veganism. And actually, it's kind of like, what would you say? It's like about the difference between cultures and consumerism and sort of bringing in veganism randomly. Like, I don't totally understand how veganism even entered this conversation.
It's extremely random, yeah, and we'll get into that, but it feels out of place, so it does kind of hit you like one of those stray bullets, like you were saying, like you're just enjoying your content, some random topic about consumerism in France and the US, and it's like, whoa, vegans are under attack.
Right. Well, that's immediately how it felt, and as soon as she said vegans, I was like, uh-oh. But I thought, okay, she's going to get past this moment and then we could move on, because I find the topic of consumerism very interesting, especially frequently her take. And then randomly, as you said, vegans were under attack. I feel like it really came out of left field. Like, can you help me make sense of how this even came up?
Okay, so there were two mentions. The first one was this totally random mention, which wasn't really an attack, but it was something that immediately stood out to me as a red flag. She basically refers to veganism as an environmental choice.
Because for them, not flying is a matter of personal principle, kind of similar to people who are vegan for, environmental reasons, or who make other environmental choices.
So I get that some of this is semantic. Sometimes people say like being vegan, but really they mean like being on a vegan diet or being on a plant-based diet. So I'm not trying to be the word police, but it definitely stood out to me as someone fundamentally misunderstanding veganism and conflating it with, environmental activism in a sense.
Right. I don't think she even said the word animals once at all.
No.
But yet her criticisms of vegans sort of were maybe centered around animal rights vegans, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So she gets into the sort of American purity and identity cultures is, basically the crux of what she's criticizing about America versus France, and how those can hamper our ability to make small changes with regard to consumption. With the vegan thing comes up because she says something that has really soaked in with her words about France is that she doesn't know many straight up vegans, but almost everyone she knows tries to eat more plant-based, which allows them to, err more toward that side, but still participate in the food culture of France.
Wow. Okay. I've
Yeah.
been to have you been to France?
I have. Yes, I have.
Me too.
Not as a
I
vegan though.
enjoyed. I have been there as a vegan, and I quite enjoyed it. Which I get what she's saying. Like, there's a big food culture there. It's definitely to a large extent centered around cheese, but there's a big vegan food culture there as well. That's not what she was referring to. I just felt like, yeah, throwing it out there because she was kind of talking about how people in France have, and this is my interpretation, have this sort of like laissez-faire, I'll say, attitude about life in a way that Americans don't, because Americans are much more like purists and like tougher and rougher and absolutists. Now, the fact that she was sort of saying that Americans are absolutist is ironic as hell.
Yes, and I think that, I did agree with her to a certain extent when it comes to like the purity culture of America or the identity culture and people holding on to that too tightly. But I was like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. Also, I think that has nothing to do with veganism.
Yeah.
And there is this sort of profound misunderstanding always of veganism being tied in with like being on an extreme diet or any type of extreme lifestyle that you can think of. Veganism always gets thrown in with that because I guess, not eating animal products is seen as extreme in the world that we live in, certainly the country we live in. So yeah, sort of agree with what she's saying. Also, again, why is veganism in there? So should we get into the TikTok?
Yes, please. I'm gonna sit back and listen to you talk about TikTok because you do it much better than I do.
Well, this is where it gets a little convoluted because she basically references a TikTok that she made about a TikTok that she saw, right? So there's a few different layers of TikToks within her discussion. So in the TikTok she saw, I guess she didn't link to it or anything, but it was a woman who is flexitarian and made a TikTok talking about how she tries to be mostly vegetarian, but sometimes, if she's out and about, something like, living her life, whatever, she might eat meat. So Chelsea claims that there were a lot of comments on that TikTok from full-time vegetarians or especially vegans, her words, encouraging the person to, quote, go all the way or do better. And she said that this felt like such a microcosm of a larger problem she sees all the time in progressive spaces, which is the closer someone is to doing what you think is the right thing, the more likely some people are to admonish them for not going further or doing better. And she says that
But it's just such a profoundly unlikable and counterproductive and smug way to approach the world.
She also relates this to politics, claiming that it's a similar challenge of how to get more people under our tent, right? Which is something that I kind of agree with. But then she once again references making more eco-friendly choices. And something that really bothered me was that she also said,
I'm actually just going to cut to my recent TikTok on this subject, that hilariously, even though this is the exact subject I'm talking about, the entire comment section is just a perfect example of this exact phenomenon in action. But here it is.
Now, I went and checked her TikTok because I was like, I need to see these comments. I need to see this phenomenon in action. But hilariously, upon further inspection, all of the comments that I saw were unbelievably mild. All the top comments were saying things like, perfection is the enemy of progress, and we need more imperfect vegetarians and vegans than a few perfect ones. I scrolled and did not see a single comment expressing the type of sentiment that she claimed is just rampant in these types of comment sections.
Yeah, let me actually go back to my 6 months because I just realized I didn't finish that thought earlier. So 6 months ago when I started watching her, she made this like offhanded comment, and it was that she would never go vegan. Speaking of absolute, definite for sure comments. And then she said, and feel free to hate me in the comments. I don't care. This is a hill I will die on. And then she moved on. And I was like, whoa, as Marianne would say, rising anxiety is much, it was like really aggressive. And it's funny because Chelsea sort of talks a lot about, how she's overcome these sort of like, a generalized anxiety disorder, like, yeah, me too, girl. And but she talks about how she's had to really work on personality issues about like, coming on too strong. Me too, girl. But this particular one was so pointed and like, so outwardly focused in a way that felt so like just like a bus hit me or something like that, and this is really where we get to the crux of the problem. I think what you just mentioned about the comments in the TikTok and what she mentioned about the comments, go ahead and hate me in the comments 6 months ago, and heaven knows how many times besides that she's like quickly put in a anti-vegan sentiment. But the comments that she was referring to were from what she kind of explained is like all vegans. And it's like, I don't know about you, but I don't really think that the comment section of anything is representative of an entire demographic, whether it's vegans or whatever. It's like, I didn't go to the TikTok and look at the comments. I'm not surprised by what you just said, but it's like validating in like a yucky, icky way. I think that comment sections exist in order to display the most extreme points of view.
Yeah, I think it is emblematic of the phenomenon that, it's like people will have one maybe negative experience or certain type of experience with a vegan in person, and then it's like to them for the rest of their lives, like all vegans are judgy and preachy. They're just conflating one experience they had, or maybe she saw one comment. A lot of content creators will do this. They'll be like, everyone was saying this in my comments, and then you look and there's like maybe one comment, and like I get it as a creator, sometimes that one comment can really stick with you, and it can flood or overwhelm maybe some of the more positive or some of the more nuanced comments you got. But also I think online is where we see the most extreme iterations of everything. And so on Chelsea's part, a seasoned person of the internet, let's say, I definitely think it's a user error to conflate that with meaning like all American vegans are X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. There is just this constant hyperbole and exaggeration when it comes to vegans.
Well, and this morning when I was leaving you an audio message, and I have to say I was hardly caffeinated when I was doing that, so I apologize if there were like 10-second breaks in between my words. I was looking for the words in my, near 47-year-old perimenopausal brain, and they're harder and harder to find, Mariel. But this morning when I was leaving you that message, I was thinking about the fact that, like, not to be on my high horse, but like Chelsea was on hers, so I'm going to get on mine with the full permission of the horse who wants me to, get on him. And in fact, he is made of plastic, not a real sentient being. Stop me. Okay. I have interviewed thousands of vegans. And I would venture to guess that in my 17 years of doing our Hen House with Marianne, I would say 99% of them would be absolutely celebrating someone like this random TikToker Chelsea was talking about, who was making significant steps in her life to eat fewer and fewer animal products. They would be applauding her. They would be like, cool, let me know if you need any recipes. Maybe some people would like jump in and talk about how they might handle a social situation where, this TikToker maybe was struggling or wanted to be a people pleaser or eat the cheese that was put in front of her or whatever. Maybe someone would go to that extreme, but most people I think would be like, yeah, that's awesome. Welcome. I mean, is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I have seen examples of what Chelsea's saying specifically in vegan groups, specifically on Facebook, which like anytime I talk about Facebook, my subscribers are like, this is why you need to not go on Facebook. But, we, in my local state Facebook group, there's a lot of what I would describe as like turbo Karens that then became vegan. And I joke on my channel a lot about being a vegan Karen, but these are like certified, like before their vegan days, they were like clearly from their online presence seem like sort of raging Karens that then became vegan and are still carrying that like energy with them. And there are times when someone will join the group, or I'll see this on Reddit sometimes, where someone will be like, I'm not vegan, but I'm trying and this and that, and I still eat XYZ. And like, they're actually coming to us and seeking, like, knock, knock, knock on the door. And I will see sometimes that people are like, well, why not just go all the way? We'll watch Dominion. And, so it's like, I do get how that can maybe feel discouraging, because I have been on the other side of that too before I was vegan, and kind of getting annoyed, but, so I agree to a certain extent that trying to just use welcoming language, but like you're saying, that is the majority of the sentiment and the actual, comments that I'm seeing online. Majority is welcoming. And aside from the Turbo Karens, there's not a whole ton of that. Certainly not enough to say all vegans confidently.
Okay. I have a question for you, but I'm realizing that within the context of this question, I want to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about you and Totally Forkable, which is your platform, because I'm very curious. I have not had that experience so much, and I do wonder if it's because I'm more speaking directly to animal activists who happen to be vegan. So let's just pause for a second and tell people what Totally Forkable is.
So Totally Forkable is a YouTube channel that I started in 2019 that has evolved a lot over the years. I think when I started it, I really wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go in, other than I wanted to talk about vegan topics. So sometimes it would be, a recipe video, me cooking something. Sometimes it would be a vlog. Sometimes it would be reviewing vegan fashions. Not very often doing more sit down deep dive type of videos. But at a certain point, probably around 2021, I started watching more kind of deep dive video essays online, like the types of videos that Chelsea, the Financial Diet, posts. And I really felt just very intellectually stimulated by them. And I always just found myself like really getting pulled in, really enjoying that. And so the channel started going more in that direction. The first one I posted was a deep dive discussion of the Chick-fil-A ads with the cows, painting on the signs, and the cognitive dissonance in that. And so then my channel turned into a lot more deep dives. One random day, I just got inspired by something I saw on Instagram of this girl doing this funny newscaster bit. And I was like, what if I did a funny newscaster bit, but for vegan news? And that's when I started doing Good Vegan News, which is a roundup of positive, only positive vegan news stories, although sometimes negative things tend to sneak their way in, as I'm sure you and Marianne are familiar with. But yeah, it was just like very funny and silly and stupid, and people really liked it. And so that kind of became a recurring thing on Totally Forkable, I guess, what I sort of became known for. And I haven't posted one in a while, to be honest, but I'm still doing deep dives, sit downs, sometimes vlogs, and hopefully more Good Vegan News in the future.
Well, and I love Totally Forkable. It's funny because when I first heard about it, I think I just made an assumption that it was like vegan foodie stuff, which I enjoy. Obviously a lot of my history is at Veg News, which is very food focused. But to me, it's like usually more of like a sort of side thing for me, because my favorite thing to cook is toast. Like I'm just not a foodie. Although I do enjoy sharing food photos with you, I admit, like somehow you're bringing out the foodie in me. But then I looked again and I looked deeper and I was like, oh wait, this is not just foodie stuff. This is like really thoughtful commentary that might start with food, but then it kind of like delves into something much deeper. And you're right, Chelsea and the Financial Diet was doing something similar. Like you would think that you were watching a video about, a particular celebrity, and then suddenly it's about like the entire way the culture is evolving around that. And anyway, so I think that we have a lot of overlap with our audiences, but I think we also don't. And I am curious, like you're being so much more generous of, generosity of spirit here, I think, than I am per usual, regarding regarding sort of validating Chelsea's perspective to some extent. I of course have heard about like these crazy vegans, and it's not like I've never seen them, but it's so rare to me, and it's so much more common for me to find a crazy meat eater or whatever. In fact, I think I said to you on my, pre-caffeinated audio message that like there's this joke that says, how do you know a vegan's at the party? They'll tell you. My experience is that it's the meat eater who will tell you, and then want to talk about how like they tried to be vegan in college once, and then you're sitting there nodding and like, eating your hummus and carrot or something, and just how did I get into this? It's them. It's not you. And but Chelsea would refuse to look internally at what role she might be playing in this dynamic.
Right, totally. Especially like making a TikTok like that is maybe going to instigate some types of those comments, and then they roll in allegedly, although I didn't see any, and then it's like and like you said, it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling
right
issue, or this pickle we seem to get ourselves into. Something that, I mean, on the less generous side, something that I know I shared in the voice note that really bothers me about like this type of person, which I think there's a lot of these types of people in the world, certainly in our country, that would identify themselves as, politically liberal, and especially on a variety of social issues. But then, just total blind spot when it comes to the issue of animal welfare, and even how, obviously, as we know, animal issues can affect humans as well. And that's something that I think really bothers me. She actually said at the beginning of the video that she wanted the conversation to be about provoking thought as much in myself as in anyone else. And yet, like you said, she has this, extreme inflexibility on these topics. So I think that's something that really bothers me, is the sort of like zero tolerance for certain social issues, right? If someone were to suggest like, well, maybe women's bodies can be controlled by men, like just a little bit every now and then, she would be like, that's absolutely ridiculous. And yet when vegans have that stance around their lifestyle and what they're choosing to pay for or not to pay for, that is suddenly like you're just an intolerable person. So it just brings up the question, like, are morals flexible? And would you expect them to be flexible across the board of social issues?
Right. But if you're talking about like the environmental perspective, which is, as you said earlier, entirely how she framed this, then yeah, flying a little less often, eating a little less meat, that's definitely those are steps toward more environmental behaviors, more environmentally friendly behaviors. But if you're looking at this from an animal rights perspective, I'm hesitant to draw these parallels because I know they're really hot button issues, and I don't really like to go there either. But it's true. I mean, if you speak out for against human trafficking, for example, do you go home and like have a couple people in your basement against their will? Yes, I said it. I said it. But it not only infuriates me, so much so that I had a nightmare that night about Chelsea, like literally the entire night. I kept waking up and falling back asleep, and the nightmare would continue all night. But it infuriates me that she is on her high horse, but not talking about the goddamn horse. There's no comment about animals at all in anything she's saying. So she's pointing to vegans and like all vegans. She's pointing to vegans' moral high ground without explaining where they're fundamentally coming from.
Yeah. And I think the absolutism, which we've talked about a few times now, I think too, around which approach works, is something that bothers me with this type of discourse in general. Even within vegans, people will have conversations like this, but sort of broadly, people saying like, giving giving credit to one method as the only method that works. Like, well, preaching doesn't work. You have to entice them with delicious food, or the food doesn't work. You have to appeal to the like the basic morals. I think there's just a problem when people make blanket statements like that about certain approaches, because everyone, I think, requires a different approach. Everyone comes to veganism in a slightly different way, and I think we all arrive at the same conclusion. But she mentioned this in that same TikTok, or maybe it was in the YouTube video when she was talking about the TikTok, that she found a creator on TikTok that was talking about what he eats at Wendy's as a vegetarian and like different fast food restaurants. And she was like, that is so amazing. That is such an amazing approach. Think about, he's doing so much more with that approach than vegans doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, not necessarily. Like, that just worked for you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So I think, sometimes it is a shamey TikTok that's needed, or a shamey TikTok comment, and sometimes it's someone, sharing what they got at Wendy's, which I assume is just a baked potato.
Which, by the way, I had another potato before, and I told you that, like, that toast is all I do. I don't like to cook. And I saw this random comment from someone saying the most obvious thing, which is that they microwaved a potato for 5 minutes, and then they air fried it for like 12 minutes at 400. And it looked so good. It reminded me of a Wendy's potato. So I made it, and it tasted so good. I had another one today. This is totally it's aside from the entire topic, but now I'm just thinking about potatoes, as I often do. Chelsea says herself, and I think I'm quoting her from a recent video, that she's part of the bourgeoisie. She is a woman of lots of privilege, and she gives the privilege.
She loves to share that point, by the way. It's her favorite talking point.
Here I am in the south of France, and I get it.
I get it. I'm privileged.
I spent half the year in New York City, and the other half. But yet, she has this blind spot. She refuses to look at. I mean, so much of going vegan for me was looking at my own privileges. And, for me, when I went vegan, like, I don't know, 23 years ago or something, after being a vegetarian for many years, it was around the same time as I was reading Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, which is an essay that is quite it's quite profound and talks about white privilege, basically. So I was like starting to come to terms with my white privilege as I was coming to terms with my human privilege, and these two things were sort of side by side for me, and it continues. Like, I'm constantly realizing, or probably also in many places not realizing, the many areas in which I have immense privilege. But you got to look at your speciesism, dude. And I mean, I think that that's such a blind spot for her. Do you think she has the possibility of changing, or do you think that, like, it's just a lost cause?
Well, I think of that meme or that quote that, gets shared often that is just so incredibly true, which is the quote, "I could never go vegan," said every vegan before going vegan, right? I mean, I don't know if you ever said that. I certainly said that multiple times. And so I don't like to think that there isn't hope for anyone. I do. I know I mentioned this in the voice note, and this is truly a bee in my bonnet. This is a hill that I will die on, which is, so much of this comes down to dairy addiction. I mean, so much of the excuses I hear from people, I'm just like, blah, 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 I'm addicted to dairy. I get it. Like, you can just say it. So many people will twist themselves up into pretzels rather than say, you know what, I'm addicted to cheese and I don't think I could give it up. And I say that as someone who was totally addicted to cheese. And it truly wasn't until reading an article, probably by Dr. Barnard, about like the addictive nature of dairy and casomorphins and all of this, and just being like, that makes sense. And so, I don't know, I'm willing to bet that a lot of what I'm sure that the cheese in France is great and all of this, and even Miyoko Shinner has said it was like her travels around France and trying all these amazing vegan cheeses that inspired her to want to start making her own. So I think if we could all just stop dancing around the fact that everyone's addicted to dairy and stop trying to intellectualize it, we'd all be a lot better off.
I think that's such a great note to end on, or almost end on, because I'm very bad at ending things. I'm glad you brought up addiction because you're right. I mean, certainly I grew up in those fluorescent 1980s where the food I grew up with, we didn't even like have dishes. We ate out of those cardboard squares, Remember those that like you would I'm sure they still exist, but you would microwave the lasagna for like 10 minutes and it would be all burnt except the middle would still be frozen, like the very center. And like that was what I grew up on. These foods are literally designed to for you to become addicted to. They go down your gullet at a very specific speed with the right amount of squishiness and saltiness that makes you crave more and more and more. And certainly with dairy, the fact that Chelsea is willing to question assumptions in every other way but this is sad to me. And I don't know why this upset me so deeply. I actually don't know why this upset me so. It's a YouTuber that I don't know. But I wanted to devote this entire episode to this conversation because why am I so upset?
I mean, there's a parasocial aspect, and when you've come to sort of view this person's content on a semi-regular basis because you've come to maybe view them as some sort of an authority or a person worth listening to, and I think that's what many subscribers. I mean, they have like, I think somewhere around 1.2 million subscribers. Their videos get tons of views. So a lot of people view this person as an authority, especially because she's so honest about so many topics. So to hear her being so willfully ignorant about something, especially like you were saying, just the consumerism aspect, and then her not connecting that to consumerism, I mean, is just a big missed opportunity.
I think it's potentially damaging. I mean, I don't want to give her more credit or, more weight than she already gives herself. But I think that it's potentially damaging to perpetuate this myth that all vegans are a particular way. And I know we have to close, but I just want to say that I have a personal trigger, and I've told you about this personal trigger. It's hard to articulate, but if someone says something to me defensively, like they're reacting to something that they perceived that I said critically, and then they're coming to me defensively, and I'm like, wait, I wasn't criticizing you. I am very triggered because I don't know, I can't say anything at that point. Because if I say, wait, no, that's not, then I'm like perpetuating this icky conversation. And that's sort of partly why I wanted to have this download session with you. And thank you. This has been very satisfying for me, and hopefully for our listeners as well, regardless of whether they know who this Chelsea person is. They probably know lots of Chelseas because we all do. But I don't feel like I have an opportunity to approach her. I mean, not that she would necessarily get the email because she's so fancy with her millions of subscribers and her bourgeoisie, but I wouldn't be able to present myself as a vegan without kind of coming across like what she assumes I already am. She's judging me before I walk into the room. She's judging all of us before we walk into the room.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like I said, it can be a difficult thing to navigate because this entire conversation could be, evidence of what she's saying. But I think it's also proof that vegans can have reasonable discussions, and we can vent our frustrations in safe spaces like this, which I think is so important and so necessary. But, we can also recognize where there's room to grow within our movement and, not be so absolute about things. I mean, other than our moral stance, which I think many people are absolute about their moral stances, whether that includes protecting animals or not.
God, I really admire you. You're a lot less jaded and mean than me. And I I actually am serious that I admire. I don't mean that it potentially could sound patronizing, but I don't mean it as such. I really want to be more like you. I want to be more willing to let my guard down in moments like these and be like, okay, well, what actually can I learn and how can I grow from this moment? So, and I get that from Totally Forkable also, by the way. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you don't have access to Marielle, as I do, haha, but also you have access to Totally Forkable. So tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find you and follow you online.
Yeah, it's Totally Forkable on YouTube, Instagram, where else? Threads, TikTok. I'm in all the places.
Do you like Threads?
I barely ever use it.
Okay.
But anytime I'll just randomly post on there once in a while, and then I totally forget, and then I go back and I somehow have, so many more likes and things happening than anywhere else. So there's something interesting going on over there, but I'm a little scared of it.
I am too. I'm also like impressed by your brain, because sometimes we'll be in a conversation and you'll be like, that reminds me of a tweet I saw in 2018. Hang on, let me pull it up. Like, that's happened more than once. And I'm like, girl, like, I don't even know where I put my keys this morning. But okay. For those of you listening and watching, while you're following Totally Forkable, make sure to follow our Hen House on all of the socials. Don't forget that Rising Anxieties comes out on Tuesdays, the Hen Report, which is this, on Thursdays, and the long form interview on Fridays. Bonus for Flock members comes out on Mondays. Once a month, we also produce the Animal Law podcast, and that's coming out this week. So that's the once a month. And thank you so much, Marielle. This was really fun. I really appreciate you. And I hope that you'll come back and have other conversations with me about non-Chelsea as well.
Yes, this was fun. Thank you, Jasmine, Marianne, all the hens, all the forks. We're all here together.
We're all in one salad bowl coop. That didn't work. Maybe I need more caffeine.
Our Totally Forkable Hen House.
Ooh, I like that.
So that was my conversation with Jasmine. I really hope that you enjoyed it. As always, I'd be super curious to hear everyone's thoughts, so let me know below. Like, subscribe, hype. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!
This is a good one. It's a magnet. Thanks.